With us now is retired Major General Randy Manner, who was one of the people that signed the letter supporting Harris. He used to be acting vice chief of the National Guard Bureau. General, thank you for being with us this morning. Why did you decide to sign on to this letter?
Well, first of all my entire life, I've been very apolitical. Not only, of course, required because I was a active duty general and also a National Guard officer. It's something where ever since 2016, where I have seen what Trump has done, how he has treated people, how he has dealt with crises, I've been just absolutely opposed to such a very dictatorial, strongman bully type of a leader. And so it was easy for me to add my name to this list of those 10 officers and NCOs.
General, what is it about Donald Trump that you believe disqualifies him from being president again?
So there's two things. And the first thing I'm going to do is appeal to every single veteran and military member that's watching this, as well as the parents of veterans, the brothers, the sisters, the spouses. Never before, not once in our history, has there been an American president who has, quite frankly, called our veterans and militaries losers and suckers, and has turned the hallowed ground of Arlington, quite frankly, into a political arena. My father is buried there. Perhaps I'll have the honor of being buried there as well at some point in the future. The important thing I want to say is that he is not a manager of crises. Not only did he set the tone for what happened in Afghanistan by negotiating literally the release of 5,000 hardened Taliban fighters, which, of course, the President Biden had no say in. That was one example of poor management. And then also during COVID, he could have been the hero of the world by creating, under the National Defense Act, creating PPE and ventilators, not only for our own country, but to export. Instead, the fact that he did not make certain decisions resulted in the loss of literally hundreds of thousands of Americans through disinformation and a lack of available resources. These are the reasons why he should not ever be the president of the United States again.
General, the House report on the Afghanistan withdrawal says Biden administration officials watered down security warnings and that the vice president was, in their words, in lockstep with the president on the withdrawal. What's your reaction to that?
Well, two things. One is it's extremely easy to dive into details of things that went wrong. Clearly, there was a suicide bomber that got through, and that is obviously horrible and resulted in the direct loss of American lives and many Afghan lives. So, of course, that did happen. And there are probably other things that happened as well. We have to step back for a second about the comment that Vice President Harris was in lockstep. In 3,288 pages in that report, Harris's name is only called out 3 times. You would think that if this heavily partisan report would have been generated, they would have sprinkled in a few hundred references to Harris to have referred to her more often. Of course, she was involved in terms of being aware of what's going on. The president of the United States makes the calls, and that's important for every viewer to understand. So I say again, 3,288 pages, her name is mentioned 3 times. That doesn't make sense.
And General, Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Tim Walz has been criticized by Republicans over his record in the National Guard and statements that implied that he was in war. And I know that you've got a very close relationship with the National Guard. Do you think the Harris campaign needs to do more to clarify these issues?
I believe that the governor, as well as the vice president and the White House, have clarified these details. This is a highly politicized campaign at this point where, quite frankly, there's a lot of wrong information that's being put out, especially by Trump, and then also, of course, by Vance. I find it abhorrent that literally any veteran would call someone else's service an act of stolen valor, which is very well defined in the federal statute. There is no stolen valor involved whatsoever. I was the acting vice chief, the number 2 person in the National Guard Bureau in 2010. I was also the general officer in the Pentagon and the Army staff, responsible for all of the alert and mobilization orders for National Guard and Army Reserve units. The timing does not add up whatsoever. And in fact, those are literally all falsehoods that he ran. He served honorably for 26 years as a citizen soldier. And again, that puts him in the ranks of only 1% of all Americans who have stood up and said, I will do this.
Retired Major General Randy Menner, I thank you very much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.